Welcome back, friends, to the Juicebox Podcast. Andy is the mom of a child with type 1 diabetes. Her daughter was diagnosed at 2 years old. She realized that her daughter's health was not going to be okay if she listened to her doctor, so she went out on her own to figure out what to do. Please don't forget that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. To save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com, all you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. Don't forget, if you're a U.S. resident who has type 1 or is the caregiver of someone with type 1, visit t1dexchange.org/juicebox right now and complete that survey. It will take you 10 minutes to complete the survey, and that effort alone will help to move type 1 diabetes research forward. It will cost you nothing to help. If you're looking for community around type 1 diabetes, check out the Juicebox Podcast private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. The episode you're listening to is sponsored by US Med. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. You can get your diabetes testing supplies the same way we do from US Med. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Eversense CGM. An implantable 6-month sensor is what you get with Eversense, but you get so much more. Exceptional and consistent accuracy over 6 months, and distinct on-body vibe alerts when you're high or low. On-body vibe alerts? You don't even know what that means, do you? EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Go find out. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox.
Hey y'all, my name is Andy. We're from North Texas. My daughter Lorelai has type 1 diabetes and celiac disease.
Have we rescheduled this a number of times?
No.
We haven't. Your name reminds me of someone else's name then.
You called us on Christmas.
Oh, that's part of the reason. Not the complete reason, though. I feel like it's been on my schedule forever. How long have we had this booked for?
I think I booked it in September of last year.
Oh, wait. October, November, December, January, February, March, April. That was 8 months ago. Jeez. I'm embarrassed for, you know what? I'm not. It's an embarrassment of riches. Let's call it that it takes so long to get on the show. Wait till you find out it takes 6 more months for it to come out after that.
Oh, yeah, I know. My husband thought this was live. He was like, oh, are we going to get to watch this when I get home from work tonight? I'm like, no, dude, you're going to be lucky if it comes out in 6 months.
Yeah, you got to stay alive and healthy if you want to see this. This is like a Star Wars movie. You got to willfully be alive for the next one. Okay, Andy. It's funny. So you have, let's see, a child with type 1 diabetes.
Yes.
Lorelai.
Yes.
And she is how old?
She is about to be 6. She will be 6 in June.
Okay. How old was she when she was diagnosed?
It was just, she was 2. She was like a week before her 2nd birthday.
Okay. The name is from the TV show or no?
Yes. And
tell people, go ahead.
About 6 months after she was born, my husband's best friend sent me a Facebook message with a link to a song called Lorelai from the band Clutch. With a message attached. I think it's awesome that you named your daughter Maneater. So there's the PSA to everybody. Make sure you know what you're naming your children before you name them, because Lorelai sounds like a beautiful name. But if you look up the meaning behind it and the folklore for the Rhine River in Germany, it's not as pretty.
It's not as much fun. But what TV show am I thinking of? It's
Gilmore Girls.
Gilmore Girls.
Yes,
okay.
I'm a Gilmore Girls junkie.
That's fine. I know a lot of ladies who are. Don't worry. And a few guys, if I'm being honest.
Hey, that's awesome.
Those guys are usually drug into it by a lady, but nevertheless, it's fine. I've avoided it. That's one I've dodged. I dodged those and singing competitions.
Oh, yeah. My mom and my sister are into the singing competitions and like the tattoo competition shows. I don't really watch those.
I did love the glass blowing one on Netflix. I watched like a full like I feel like I watched 2 seasons of it. Then it came out again. And I turned it back on. And I was like, oh, I'm done with this. And I just completely didn't care after that.
I think we watched some of that. My husband does blacksmithing stuff as a hobby. He's been a pharmacy tech for 21 years with a big box retail store. He took that up just as just something fun to do, and we watched that. It's a show. It's like Fire and something that they do a blacksmithing competition.
I think I've heard of it. Yeah.
Forged in Fire.
Oh, yeah, you're exactly right. So what does he do for a living?
He's a pharmacy technician. He's a manager of the store that he works at.
And in his free time, he makes horseshoes and other things like that.
No, he makes knives and swords, and he's an avid hunter. He does draw hunts. Him and his best friend and their family sign up for draw hunts in the state of Texas. And if you get picked, you go on random hunts. And he's been to the Lubbock area to hunt mule deer. And he was just down, I know I'm going to say it wrong, it's down by the Mexican border to hunt gator for wildlife management. Mm-hmm. And he just brought home an 11-foot, 348-pound alligator. What
will you be doing with that? Eating it, I imagine?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all processed in our freezer. And, Lorelai has celiac, so there's a lot of things that we can't just go eat because most restaurants don't make that stuff gluten-free. So when he gets a hold of an animal like this, like we'll have a big gator fry, we'll do gator tail, and she'll have her own little gluten-free plate.
Oh, that's lovely. I've had gator nuggets.
Yeah.
Before. They were not bad. They weren't exactly like, people are like, it's like chicken. And then I bit it. I was like, have you had chicken? This isn't exactly like chicken. But I didn't dislike them. Has he ever done or applied to be in one of those hog hunts? Because aren't wild hogs like a real problem in Texas?
Yeah, pretty much. If you have a lease or you have somebody that gives you permission to go on their property, I think hogs are year round because they're so overrun. It's just like coyotes. Mm-hmm. They're so overrun, and they mess with livestock too. So
interesting.
Those are kind of free game.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, does he sell his knives?
No, it's just kind of hobby. He's made stuff for friends. Like we run around with 2 of our friends that are married, and for their wedding, he made them his and her knives. And he's made spears and stuff to do some of his hunts.
Let's hope they don't use those his and her knives on each other when things get tough.
I'm going to make them listen to this now.
What a story that would be. It's like, remember that lovely gift I gave them at their wedding? Well, one night they got into a fight about 16 years later. Oh, they're not Canadian, though. They're not Canadian. They won't stab each other. They'll.
Oh, dear God.
The Canadians love to stab.
Ooh.
That's just something I've heard. All right. So I've spoken to you on the phone before?
Yeah, briefly. You posted something on Facebook. I think it's Christmas Eve, 2023. Post your information here and I'll give you a call. I think we talked for like 5 minutes.
New Year's Eve.
Maybe it's, New Year's.
Oh, yeah. I get very bored on New Year's Eve. I hate it. It's like, New Year's Eve feels like a wasted day to me for some reason. Because I don't drink, and I don't care to sit up and watch Dolly Parton sing with someone else at midnight or whatever ends up happening. And so, but there's nothing to do because the world kind of closes down.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to call people from the podcast. Oh, I did that. How was I? Was I okay?
Yeah, it was great.
Oh, well, you'd have to say great. But I just mean, it wasn't like you didn't hang up the phone and then think, what a waste of time. We should not have done that.
No.
Oh, very nice. Okay. Well, what makes you want to come on the podcast there, Andy? If you take insulin or sulfonylureas, you are at risk for your blood sugar going too low. You need a safety net when it matters most. Be ready with Gvoke HypoPen. My daughter carries Gvoke HypoPen everywhere she goes because it's a ready-to-use rescue pen for treating very low blood sugar in people with diabetes ages 2 and above that I trust. Low blood sugar emergencies can happen unexpectedly, and they demand quick action. Luckily, Gvoke HypoPen can be administered in 2 simple steps, even by yourself in certain situations. Show those around you where you store Gvoke HypoPen and how to use it. They need to know how to use Gvoke HypoPen before an emergency situation happens. Learn more about why Gvoke HypoPen is in Arden's Diabetes Toolkit at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used if you have a tumor in the gland on the top of your kidneys called a pheochromocytoma, or if you have a tumor in your pancreas called an insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk for safety information.
Really, we're about almost 4 years in. So June 17th of this year will make 4 years type 1 diabetes. And I feel like we've just moved so fast through all the information and all the technology and just kind of sharing our experience with it. And also just, no matter where you are in this journey, just maybe hearing that you can keep going and kind of also reiterating the fact that groups like the Juicebox Podcast, that's where the hope lies, I think. Our diagnosis story, my daughter's diagnosis story, it wasn't that traumatic, I don't think. I mean, it sucked, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like she was moments from a coma or anything. But the overall, I guess, idea at the hospital was this is as good as it gets. Don't ask for more. I don't know if you've seen the movie Forgetting Sarah Marshall, where Paul Rudd is telling Jason Segel to pop up on the board. And then he does. And he's like, no, you're doing too much. Get down. And he pop up on the board. He does it again. Or he just sits there and he's like, no, you're not doing enough. Pop up on the board. That's what our hospital experience felt like. And I've gained so much information and have been able to implement it that if I can in turn give back to at least one person with even just my voice, I'd love the opportunity to do it.
Oh, well, let's do that then. So you said you moved through technology very quickly. What does that mean?
So we did MDI for a year, about 13 months. 6 months into it is around the time that I found the podcast, and then simultaneously the low carb group. And so I was using pre-bolusing with lower carb foods, which allowed me, it gave us a break, I feel like. Her sugars stayed notoriously in the 400s for the first 6 months. I mean, there was just no break from it. Mm-hmm. And then we were just kind of damned if we do, damned if we don't with long-lasting insulin. And that if I gave it to her at night, she'd tank. If I didn't give it to her, her blood sugar was 300 when she woke up. And so implementing a lot of the strategies from the Pro Tip series, Bold Beginnings, and Variables, and then the low carb community, it kind of gave me that time to practice with everything without it being intense.
Okay.
And then I was able to find iPort because of the podcast.
Nice.
And so I jumped on that bandwagon. We actually got a call from Medtronic when Texas was in that apocalyptic freeze in 2021.
I remember that.
And I had a 2-year-old diabetic and a 2-month-old newborn, my son Eli, and we were at our neighbor's house because we were up without power for 7 days.
Oh.
And Medtronic gave me a call and they're like, hey, we're ready to ship out your iPort order. And I'm like, yes, we need that. So going through using iPort for about 6-7 months, I was able to take some more information from the podcast and give the basal insulin in the morning, maybe an hour before we did her breakfast insulin. I was able to correct more and get her down to like an A1C of 5.6, 5.7.
Well, look at you.
And then we moved to a pump, had the same problems with the Aeros pods that we did with MDI. She'd go to bed, go low. And it was probably 2 months of doing that I jumped on the bandwagon with another person in the low carb community who has been a really big cheerleader for us to start DIY looping. Mm. And she helped us get started on that. From there, I haven't looked back. We did the virtual machine, turning the Windows computer into a Mac system. My husband did all of that, bless his heart. Then in 2023, they came out with browser build. And so then I painstakingly taught myself how to do that. It only took me 4 hours the first time.
It's not bad, actually. I can't even take credit for doing it myself. I still lean on other people. I have to be perfectly honest. Yeah.
I messed it up so bad. And when we were building the caregiver app, because that was the one thing that I wanted for my daughter to go to kindergarten this year, was I'm not going to deal with the doctor's orders. I know the doctors have to have some kind of system in place, and they can't have diabetics over here doing something and diabetics over here doing something else. And it can create chaos. I understand that. But their orders are conservative on the DMP. They don't want her corrected unless she's over 240, and they only want one correction every 4 hours. Mm. And I'm just like, meh, Nope. So we got help through the Loop community. There's a moderator named Dan. I'm going to give him a shout out because he put up with me while we were trying to build the caregiver app. He was very gracious and kind. He's from Germany and made time to FaceTime me to actually get it all figured out.
Wow. When you say put up with you, do you think like if he heard this right now, he'd be like, oh, Andy, she was a pain in the ass? Like that kind of thing, or no?
No, he was really, really nice. He was like, everybody thinks I'm like a grumpy old man. He's like, he's really young. I think he's in his 20s. But if he doesn't have children, it's probably my fault because both of my children decided to scream like banshees while I was on FaceTime with him. And it was nuts. Like, you want birth control? Call my house because my 2 kids, as soon as I get on the phone, if they're here, it's like World War III.
That's hilarious. I have always disliked ordering diabetes supplies. I'm guessing you have as well. It hasn't been a problem for us for the last few years, though, because we began using US Med. You can too. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514 to get your free benefits check. US Med has served over 1 million people living with diabetes since 1996. They carry everything you need, from CGMs to insulin pumps and diabetes testing supplies and more. I'm talking about all the good ones, all your favorites. Libre 3, Dexcom G7, and pumps like Omnipod 5, Omnipod DASH, Tandem, and most recently, the iLet pump from Beta Bionics. The stuff you're looking for, they have it at US Med. 888-721-1514 or go to usmed.com/juicebox to get started now. Use my link to support the podcast. That's usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the only 6-month wear implantable CGM on the market. And it's very unique. So you go into an office. I've actually seen an insertion done online, like a live one, they recorded it. The entire video is less than 8 minutes long and they're talking most of the time. The insertion took no time at all, right? So you go into the office, they insert the sensor. Now it's in there and working for 6 months. You go back 6 months later, they pop out that one, put in another one. So 2 office visits a year to get really accurate and consistent CGM data. But that's neither here nor there for what I'm trying to say. So this thing's under your skin, right? And you then wear a transmitter over top of it. Transmitter's got this nice, gentle silicone adhesive that you change daily. So very little chance of having skin irritations. That's a plus. So you put the transmitter on, it talks to your phone app, tells you your blood sugar, your alerts, your alarms, etc. But if you want to be discreet for some reason, you take the transmitter off, just swoop, comes right off. No, not like peeling at it or having to rub off adhesive. It just kind of pops right off. This silicone stuff, really cool. You'll say it. And now you're ready for your big day, whatever that day is. It could be a prom or a wedding or just a moment when you don't want something hanging on your arm. The Eversense CGM allows you to do that without wasting a sensor, because you just take the transmitter off and then when you're ready to use it again, you pop it back on. Maybe you just want to take a shower without rocking a sensor with a bar of soap. Just remove the transmitter and put it back on when you're ready. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. You really should check it out. Well, you know what you said that really just caught my attention? I mean, all of it was very interesting, but what just caught my attention is that you somehow married this podcast with a low carb lifestyle. And you did it really well in the beginning, right? I don't know if you still do it or not. Does she?
So, yeah. Hold on 1 second. The nurse is texting me.
Go ahead,
it's almost lunchtime.
Read the text out loud, if you will.
Okay. Her blood sugar's 83, and the nurse is asking, I'll just give half of the insulin, right?
What do you think?
I'm telling her, yes, give half.
Okay.
I have a series of alarms on my phone throughout the day. By the way, I'm not working. I'm home with my children. So for anybody that's working and it's like, God, how do you do all of this? Well, I don't have a job. I'm a bum. So her first alarm goes off at 10:15. That lets me know lunch is coming up. 10:45, that lets me know that, hey, if we've done a split bolus, I need to go back in and give her the rest of the insulin. 11:45, that's just, hey, check for fat and protein. And recess is coming up. See what her blood sugar is. We may need to turn her pump down. 12:50 is, hey, we're going off to PE. Let's double check, make sure pump is turned down. unless she doesn't need that. And then 145 is, hey, make sure she's getting to the nurse for insulin for snack. But as far as the low carb community, I was full force low carb when I first started doing it. And it was just one meal at a time, practice it, see how it works. And the biggest difference for me was if my kid isn't going to eat it, I'm not going to make her eat it.
Okay.
So we'll try it, but if it's something that she just won't eat, she's got to eat food. I'm not going to break my neck trying to get her to eat something that she thinks tastes bad. So we started with like breakfast, like Birch Bender's waffles and sugar-free syrup and things like that. And just really practicing the meal and getting the insulin dosing down and the timing down.
Mm-hmm.
And that worked really great for probably 6 to 8 months. And I mean, gosh, her lowest A1C has been a 5.2. But where it started flipping script on us was when she needed coverage for the fat and protein, and I didn't know how to do it. I attempted using the R insulin, the regular insulin that's just over the counter at the pharmacy, but there was really no method. And I say that loosely because if you follow the low carb communities, you can figure out how to use it if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
But we had so many problems with basal insulin that the R insulin was kind of acting like that as well.
I see.
She was going low.
Small body weight, right?
Right. Yeah. She was 19 pounds when she was diagnosed. So by the time I started using insulin, the R insulin, she might have been 23 pounds.
Was there also a honeymoon in there?
There was, but again, it was very strange because I felt like she just like went full force into diabetes to the point where a half unit of Levemir was enough to put her in the 50s at night. But if you didn't give it, then she was 300-400 when she woke up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough time.
We were just stuck between a rock and a hard place on MDI.
Young kid, still MDI, too much basal one way, not enough basal the other way, but you're balancing a more lower carb lifestyle with the things you're hearing about on the podcast. And where does that lead to?
So that led us to finding out how to actually bolus for fat and protein without using our insulin, just because our insulin was just hard on her, just like the basal was. So we moved over I just went back to the podcast and I went to the little search icon, typed in fat and protein, and that led me to the episode Waltzing the Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to it. I'm like, yes, this is exactly what I needed. This is what I was looking for. And I found that fat and protein calculator. And at first I started doing about 50%. So like I would type it all in, get that, what that carb count would be for the fat and protein. And then I would start giving her half just to see how she would react to it. And then if I felt like she needed more, I would give that. But if I knew she was going to be super active, I'd only do the half, like the 50%. Once I got comfortable with insulin just in and of itself, really just starting to say, you know what? Hey, why don't we just try pre-bolusing for dipping dots? Why don't we try pre-bolusing for that little piece of cake or whatever? And it's taken a couple of years to really get me there. But fast forward to now, we went to her kindergarten field trip and she had a low carb lunch. It was pre-bolused for her. She did a lot of walking. Once we signed the kids out, me and my friend signed our daughters out. We went to the dipping dot stand. She got 2 units. We stood in line for 10 minutes. She sat down to eat her ice cream. She got 3 more units and we walked out of the park and her blood sugar was 83.
Look at you. Wow. You're good at this.
Some days still suck, but that's just part of it.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. And do you find that when it sucks, it's more of a learning experience than just a bad experience?
Right. This whole week she's been sick. She's had croup. So she's been out. I just got her back to school today. So sugar's been all over the place. And thank God she's not been throwing up. Also, I'll take that. But as far as like the fever, the cough that she's had, our diabetes week has been pretty hard. I think her average blood sugar's been like between 140 and 160, just trying to keep everything together. And then she went to school this morning and threw a curveball at me and didn't want to eat breakfast and ended up in the nurse's office with a blood sugar of 58. So we had to fix it.
So you bolus and then she's like, no, thank you.
Yeah, pretty much. I gave her a few grapes and then kindergarten has turned into A1C is about a 5.9 right now, but she gets a lot of adrenaline the minute we walk out the door. And I know you've talked about this too with Arden. We do a low carb breakfast. So ratio keto yogurt, but it's 15 grams of fat and 15 grams of protein.
Mm-hmm.
That converts into about 2 units for her. So I'll do the six carbs worth in the morning, pre-bolus her that by about 15 minutes. As soon as she's done eating, I go ahead and hit her with the fat and protein.
Okay.
And then it really just depends on where her sugar's hitting. Sometimes, most of the time, she will go up and be 160, 180 when we walk out the door if I don't give her that adrenaline dose.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of have to time that essentially 3 units just to get us out the door in the morning. Settings on loop or low carb. So we do kind of fight with that as well. I have to know how to dose for those higher carb foods with settings that are lower carb. But when we're at school or it's a school day, breakfast, lunch are typically low carb. And then at night, it's not a free for all when we come home. But if we're doing stir fry, she'll have rice. If we're doing pizza, we'll make sure she's got pizza that she can eat that's gluten-free. I'm just not going to send her to school with gluten-free bread, like a gluten-free peanut butter and jelly, because we have to dose 2 to 3 times more insulin for something that's gluten-free than we would have if it was wheat.
Yeah. A lot of gluten-free foods, just they hit harder, right? Their glycemic load is heavier.
Right.
And so what you're saying is that for most of the time when you're doing low carb meals, you have a ratio set up in your system. You have a basal set up in your system that all works well with low carb. But if you start adding carbs or some of that gluten-free food that is harder to hit, you basically do a conversion in your head? Or do you just do you eyeball it? How do you do it?
So if she eats an Applegate corn dog, those are 22 carbs. And I've learned this from the podcast, just doing a search too, just on the Facebook page about just high glycemic like rice flour.
Mm-hmm.
And all the celiacs on there are going, oh yeah, you have to double dose, sometimes triple dose. And some of the celiacs are like, I don't understand. That doesn't hit me that way. And I'm like, oh, you're lucky.
Mm-hmm.
But so for a corn dog, I will look at her blood sugar, say her blood sugar is anywhere between 90 and 130. I will throw the corn dog in the air fryer. It's 10 minutes. I'll go ahead and dose her the 2 units for the corn dog. Then I'll pull it out, let it cool down. She's eating, within 15 minutes. And when she sits down to eat, depending upon where her sugar is, I'll go ahead and hit her with 22 carbs, 2 more units.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll put her pump. I have little settings. One of them is just called rice flour, and it's like 50% more. It just turns loop up by 50%.
Okay.
And I'll hit that for an hour, and then she starts eating, and typically she falls anywhere between 120, 150 by the time she's eating it.
Andy, you figured this stuff out with the podcast, the Facebook group, and what else? Where did you get all this information from to pull together and to help you make your decisions?
So the Juicebox Podcast, Let Me Be 83. There's one that was recommended to me via the Juicebox Podcast, and I think it's called Parents with Celiac and Type 1. Let me look at the Facebook page real quick.
That's amazing. That's fantastic, actually. Taking references from different places and blending them together to do a thing that works for you.
It's called Empowering Parents of Children with Celiac Disease and Type 1 Diabetes.
What a title. I don't want to be... Jeez, who named that one?
I don't know. I go there. Well, okay, so here's the deal. She was diagnosed with celiac through blood work a year after type 1 diabetes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it was still the middle of COVID, and they couldn't get her in to do a scope until October. They get her in, they do the scope, they see the damage. They're like, yes, go gluten-free. So we go gluten-free, or so I thought. I see somebody post on that celiac page, what kind of meat sticks should I eat that are gluten-free? This is a year after the celiac diagnosis. And I'm going, wait, what? The person that helped us with, watch out for toothpaste, watch out for shampoo. You're going to have to start really reading labels to watch out for celiac or to watch out for gluten. Nobody said anything about processed meats having gluten in them. And so for a year after we got the diagnosis of celiac, I was giving her Slim Jims as a snack.
Oh, so you thought you were doing it, but you kind of still weren't because there were some foods that you didn't realize had gluten in it.
Right. And somebody posted on that celiac group, and it just popped up in my feed on Facebook. And I was sitting there laughing, and my husband goes, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "Mother ever." God dang it. So it's always something. But yeah, it's just all the information I've found. I just encourage anybody. I'm not going to tell you what to eat. When I first started the low carb journey with my daughter, I was all for it, gung ho. Oh, yes, you should do this. Why don't they teach us this in the hospital? I will say that the low carb community can be a bit like Mean Girls. On Wednesdays, they wear pink. And you definitely need to know how to use the insulin. The hospital's failure is in that they can't be there to babysit you or to teach you all of these little things. And so they just teach everybody the same thing, stay alive. And then I think the low carb community can kind of take it too far. And it gets a little bit where they're like proselytizing. Is how you say the word?
Yeah, that's the word.
We all have to make our own decisions. There's a ton of crap food out there, obviously. And you just take all the information for what it is. And it's totally okay to take something from one place and use it and take something from another place and use it. I toe the line. So I'm not going to tell anybody what to do.
Good for you.
Just use the insulin.
No, I'm very impressed with your ability to not pick a side, like to look and say, hey, there was good information in a lot of different places. Like, why do I have to put on a jersey for one of these teams and root against the other team?
All the literature that's out there too, Dr. Bernstein's diabetic solution. I mean, at the time he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, he was like 12 in the 40s. He did what he had to do to live better than what the doctors were telling him he would be able to.
Yeah, 1,000,000%.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of you like what you've done here in building the podcast. You walked so that people like me could run for my kid.
Oh, that's nice of you to say.
I mean, that's the ultimate gift. And we just had a 4th grader at my daughter's school diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And I wrote the Juicebox podcast down on a sticky note and I slipped it over to the nurse. And I'm like, I know you probably won't, but you should give this to the parents.
Oh, it's very nice of you to say. And I'm just, again, I want to say I'm very impressed with your ability to blend ideas, especially in a culture now that, I mean, honestly, like the way we get I don't want to sound like a broken record here because people say this all the time, even though I don't think I've ever said this here, but the way people get their news is obviously very algorithm centric. Like you get fed things that you are going to agree with. Right. And so that's kind of that's a little bit of the problem. The other bit of the problem is I do think people like to be on teams, right? They like to root for their side, root against another side. I think that happens as well. I have no problem in the world with people eating low carb. Like I've never once had a thought in my mind, like no one should do that. There are days that go into more days that Arden eats low carb for reasons of just, taste and flavor and what she decides she wants to eat one day. I wouldn't think twice about it. But I got by some people, I think I got labeled as like a carb pusher because I was saying, and will continue to say, you need to meet the need. There's an amount of insulin that your body needs. You need to use that amount of it at the right time. And for my money, that was me saying, I would rather people understand how insulin works and be able to apply it to what they're eating than to spend my time trying to talk people into eating a certain way. Because I just don't think that's a tenable idea. I don't think that I or anyone else could talk everybody into eating us let's say that there was an actual right way to eat. Like, I don't know, Jesus knows it. He shares it all with us or she or whatever. I don't care. And this absolute, right? These are the right things to eat. Eat this on Monday, this on Tuesday, this on Wednesday. You're going to be as healthy as possible. Like that was the right way to eat. Even if it was that, I don't know that you could make everyone do it. I actually don't think you could. And so in the interim, let's not see people running around with 350, 400 blood sugars because they make less than valuable choices with their food choices, right? And I'm not saying that it has to be low carb. You can eat a diet that has 50, 60, 70 carbs a day in it and be eating healthier foods, but you still need to know how to bolus for it. You need to know how to bolus for a Twinkie the same way you need to know how to bolus for a sweet potato. You know what I mean? Or, you have to understand that there's carbs in carrots, like stuff like that. or that you might eat meat and have a completely low carb lifestyle, but still see some sort of a bump from the protein later.
Right.
All these things are going to happen. You should know how to use the insulin for them. Now, after that, if you want to move on to another person or an idea or a book or a podcast and figure out a healthier way for you to eat, then God bless, you'll know how to use the insulin for that too. That's it for me. Having said that, I haven't had as much problem with it over the last couple of years as I've had in the past. It almost seems like people have calmed down a little bit, if that makes sense. So I don't know if maybe, I obviously don't know the other side of it. I'm not in anybody else's Facebook group. I don't pay attention to what they're doing in the world. I don't actually know what they're doing. But it just, everybody seems a little calmer at the moment. I don't know if that's me being wishful thinking or if that's actually true. But one way or the other, I'm impressed with how you handled it.
Well, thank you. I just think that the catalyst for all of this was really me I was listening to the doctor. I was being dutiful. I was doing everything they were telling me to do. And it was a dumpster fire every day for 6 months. On top of having a toddler with type 1 diabetes, I was pregnant with my son. And the turning point was a sausage on a stick. Gave her the sausage on a stick. I dosed like the doctor told me to. Within 20 minutes, her blood sugar was 400 and she stayed that way for like 8 hours. And it was the most miserable day and experience we've had thus far with type 1 diabetes. And she's had stays in the hospital due to stomach viruses since then. But that was the moment I decided I wanted more, and I wanted more for her. We couldn't keep living like this. The doctors were just not giving us the information other than just teaching us how to survive. And my mother-in-law was pushing me to find some kind of group. And I was against the idea of a group where everybody does the same thing and everybody has high blood sugars and there's no real growth. I just assumed that if the doctors didn't know any better, how could anybody else know any better? And she had probably said to me for the millionth time, Andy, find a diabetes support group. And I said, fine, I'll just look one up on Facebook. And I just typed in diabetes group, and here comes the Juicebox Podcast. And I'm looking through everything and reading, and I'm like, well, what can this guy know? Huh?
I know, right? Seems like an idiot, but go ahead. Yeah.
But I started listening, and the dynamic between you and Jenny, you as a caretaker, her as living with it and taking care and helping people who live with it. It's just such a great dynamic, and the information is so easy to understand. You just have to take the time to actually, you have to devote some of your time to it. And I've listened to a lot of the podcast, not all of it by any means.
What?
So,
I'm sorry, this interview is over.
No, okay. You've got a lot of episodes. You push an episode out every day. I'm trying to keep up, buddy.
Hey, I'm trying to keep up too. Don't worry.
No, you're fine. So one of the first things I heard you say on I cannot remember what the episode is. I'm not Nico. I don't remember everything.
Do you think Nico's freaked out that you used her name on the podcast?
I don't know.
Actually, let's hold your thought for 1 second.
Sure.
I keep thinking while you're talking, why are you not a group expert in my Facebook group?
I have no idea.
Think about that. If that's the thing you'd like to do, I'd like you to do it. But go ahead. So go ahead. You're not Nico. You don't know every episode, but I said this thing. What'd I say?
You said it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission. And I had forgot that before I had children, that was my motto. I lived by that. It was just, I was a manager at Walmart for a few years in the optical department, and I lived by that with dealing with my market directors and trying to appease them all the time. I heard you, we were in the swimming pool and I was listening to this episode and I go, oh, light bulb. I forgot I can be an asshole. I forgot I can fight back.
I want to be clear. I don't see that as being an asshole, but I take your point. That I mean, the truth is you get so busy trying to make everybody happy, you can't really accomplish anything. You know, your new job is the doctor happy? Is the school nurse happy? You know, is my spouse happy? Is this person happy? Am I doing everything that everybody expects from me? How about just do what's right? And then, like, you know, if you get called out later, just go, oh, sorry. You know, like, it's obvious to me. You get put in this situation where if I took you to 4 different doctors and asked them all the same question, you very likely would get 4 different answers. So now that means that there are 4 different groups of people out there living their lives the way their doctor spoke to them. And it doesn't say that any of them are completely right or completely wrong, but I think that there's a blend of right and wrong mixed through those 4 doctors and a Facebook group and ideas about eating low carb and how to use insulin. And you need to take all that stuff together and just turn it into your own, into your own salad, and then use what works for you.
A lot of the days just kind of run together as you start going through life, and, you have memories that stick out, good and bad. And that day it was lay down and just take it as it is, or do something. It really was a hard day, and I'll never forget that.
It's so good that you just were like, I'm not doing this anymore. And this isn't good for her. Like that's how I mean, listen, when my kid was little, that's how it struck me. I was like, how could I be doing what I'm being told? And my daughter's A1C is in the 8s, but a person who doesn't have diabetes A1C is in the high 4s. And that doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. It seemed like such a give up to me. And I just wasn't willing to give up like that. I mean, try to imagine, like right now, Arden's at school. She's she's almost done her sophomore year of college, and she's literally thriving and doing just everything that she thought she would do. But I mean, what level of illness would she have right now if I left her A1C in the 8s for the last 18 years?
As I started learning stuff, that was the biggest pushback from the endocrinologists. Mind you, we use Cook Children's out in Fort Worth, Texas. The hospital group is amazing. I mean, I had called the pediatrician the morning I suspected the diabetes. They didn't laugh in my face. They just said, okay, you're not crazy till we prove you crazy. Come in. We're going to check your sugar. They threw us straight onto Cook Children's Hospital. So we drove 35 minutes into downtown. But as soon as we got back to triage, the first thing that was ever said to me by a nurse, and I don't think she meant it in the way that it came out, we were all wearing masks, so it's not like we could read facial expressions. She looked at me and said, "Don't worry, Mom. She's not that sick." And now I understand that, my kid wasn't in DKA, so she really wasn't that sick. But my response to her, because I knew enough about diabetes growing up, because I have a cousin with type 1 diabetes.
Oh.
It was forever. And so my response to her was, yeah, but it's a life sentence. And she just kind of cocked her head at me. And collectively, our experience with our endocrinologist and the physician assistant that works with her, they trust me more now than when we first started. But every visit, every 3 months, I would come in with something. Pre-bolusing. The next appointment, I would say, how about low carb? And it was, you shouldn't pre-bolus because you don't know how much she's going to eat. And what happens if the food at the restaurant comes out too late and she goes low? We would much prefer her blood sugar to be 400 for the sake of experience.
I love people that always assume the wrong thing's going to happen. And it's the only thing they can imagine. I'm going to listen, you're going to pre-bolus and be like, great. If the food doesn't come out in time, have juice with you. There, yeah. All fixed. How is, instead of a small fix like that to an idea, how is the idea next? Just let their blood sugar jump up into the 3s, the 4s, and stay there for hours instead of just being ready if something should happen. I don't like people who plan for failure. You know what I mean? That is a lot what that feels like to me. It's just planning for failure. I wanted to say, because we're going to get past it, your idea that look, it's a life sentence. That's a very realistic and honest statement. But again, there's more to say after that. It's a thing we have for our whole life. But you know what? I think we could mitigate a lot of the problems I'm seeing with this. Instead of just making the first blanket statement that comes to mind and then just accepting that as reality from here forward. I don't understand why people don't think they can impact something. You know what I mean? I don't begrudge you having an honest emotion and saying, my kid just got this thing, it's never going to go away. That's a real honest emotion you have to work through. It doesn't mean there's not more you can do.
Right.
And it doesn't mean you've given up because you're being honest about the situation. Am I right about that?
No, exactly.
Yeah.
We don't get to pick the cards we're dealt in life. I know that sounds maybe gimmicky, but it's true. You can look at a situation and let it kill you, or you can get back up and keep going. But I refuse to take subpar care in it as well.
Yeah. Listen, Andy, there are people who have actual life sentences. Like, they get put in prison for the rest of their lives. And you can watch documentaries about some of them. They find a way to live the best life possible locked in a cage.
Yep.
Diabetes certainly isn't incarceration like that. And, like, everything, God, it does sound like you're in San Francisco and everything smells like patchouli oil when you say something like this. But, like, your life is really what you make of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And everyone's not promised a rose garden. So some of us don't get roses, and some of us get roses with weeds in them, and some of us don't even get a garden, some of us don't have a house, and everyone's going to have so many different versions of their reality. But within most of those things, you can build a happy life. Now, don't get me, and I want to say, I'm not trying to say that if you're living under a bridge right now and shitting into a paper cup that, like some good feelings are going to pull you out of it. I do think, and this is a fairly existential conversation at this point, but I do think there's a way to be a happy homeless person if you're absolutely stuck in it. Maybe not happy, but happier than someone else who just says, this is my life, and lays in a pile. Like, so no matter what version of life you get, I think there's a spectrum of happiness to be had within that version of life. Does that make sense? I think that's as clear as I can say it.
You think about the pain scale at like a hospital, or like 0 to 10. And I feel like when you look at somebody's life, like the trauma or the level of hard, this level of hard might be a 6 for somebody and a 10 for somebody else. But within those feelings, that feeling is valid, but it's what you do in spite of that and how you keep going.
Yeah. It's not a loss till you give up.
Right.
That's pretty much it.
I'm no stranger to life kicking me in the ass. My mom was 19 when she had me, and we grew up in the Bible Belt. So, I mean, she was damned if she did and damned if she didn't. If you wanted to be right for the hereafter, you better have that kid. But, oh my God, you had that kid as a teenager and you're a piece of trash. And that kind of trickled down, and she struggled with drug addiction throughout her life. She's full of tenacity and grit, and that's definitely rubbed off on me. And
I thought you were going to say meth. I thought you were going to say she's full of tenacity and meth. Go ahead, sorry.
She's going to kill me when she hears this now. No,
you know what? She's not, because the thing you just said was really thoughtful. Like, being put into a situation when you're 19 and being told by everybody, hey, you got yourself pregnant. Now do the right thing and have the baby. And then the minute the baby comes out, they look at you and you go, oh, look at this hooker having a baby at 19 years old. You know what I mean?
Pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. Like, go ahead.
Rocking a hard place. But I think I've learned a lot from her over the years, and she's definitely done so much to better her life. And even through all the pain, she was in a really bad accident a year after my stepdad passed. And my little sister is 10 years younger than me, and she was taking the death of her biological father really hard, and was in the hospital trying to get help for some mental issues. My mom worked for a meat plant down south in South Texas, and was in a really bad accident and lost her hand. Her hand up to her forearm.
Holy hell.
And in that time, I thought this was the hardest thing that I've ever dealt with. I was at work. Somehow my mom managed to call my husband at work and told him to go get me in the middle of her, trying not to bleed to death. And I was stuck with fight or flight. Tyler called me, and I'm just standing in the middle of the vision center. Like, I don't know what to do. Do I go down to Bryan, where my sister's in the hospital, and ask for a bunk bed so we can have more room for activities? Or do I try to make it to the hospital and hope my mom's not going to die? Like,
jeez.
At 25 years old, like, I had no idea what to do. My dad, the only dad I knew, had passed away at 42 years old. And here's my mom's probably not going to make it. My sister's falling apart. What do I do?
Yeah, no kidding. Hey, was this a workplace accident she had?
Yes,
So
it was.
So there's some meat that didn't get used that day? Is that what I'm hearing?
My uncle got in the hospital. When she came to, they had a nerve blocker. So when she woke up from surgery, she wasn't in pain at that moment because she couldn't feel anything. And my uncle's sitting in the room with us, and he goes, "Well, that batch just went to the trash can." And she's like, "Well, what the F is that supposed to mean?" And he's like, "Well, it's too fatty. The fat content's way too high."
Oh, that's terrible. I love people who deal with pain with humor. My best friend's father passed away when we were younger. He had cancer and died pretty quickly. The day he passed away, I mean, we knew it was coming. And the day he passed away, I rushed to my friend's side, and he's just as shocked as you could be. And at the same time, his mother was going through menopause. And I said, "Is it possible your dad cut himself and rubbed the cigarettes in the cut to get away from your mom?"
Oh my God. Yeah, they're running.
He just broke up laughing, and there was just one little moment of levity in probably one of the worst days of his life. I love your uncle doing that. Oh, I had to throw away a bunch of hamburger today. Well, did she get pulled into a machine?
She did.
Oh, it's horrible.
She got pulled into a machine. So the plate, on a meat grinder, the plate has 3 holes, and part of the plate was actually broken. Is so the worm that rotates the meat through. And I'm sorry to anybody that's doing this.
No, go ahead. You're fine. I'm holding on to the chair, but go ahead.
Trigger warning, because I have all the pictures, because we took pictures for legal reasons and things like that. The machine itself, that it's a circle with 3 holes. So the worm pulled her fingers in, and as it was twisting everything, the bottom part of the plate was open, and it just fed her hand through.
Oh my God. Is she wealthy now?
No.
What? What's a hand and an arm worth?
It's a small company. She seeked legal advice, and it just...
Oh my God. Don't tell me this. I thought your mom was the queen of Texas at this point. No?
No. She's doing all right. She fell, I think it was the beginning of 2023. She fell getting out of the shower and landed on her elbow. And my sister's 24 and still lives with her. And she came running because she hears my mom screaming, and my mom's butt naked in the floor, and there's blood everywhere. And my mom's broke her elbow, and the bone is sticking through. And this is on the nub that, 7-8 years prior, she fed to a machine. So I love my mom to death. She's a pain in my ass. And she just found out that she's type 2 diabetic. And I've been telling her this for the last year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And we just finally got her on metformin. And she's lucky that she lives an hour away. And the doctor's not within my vicinity because they've just been letting her sit at an A1C of 6.4. And I feel like I'm having to pull eldest daughter tactics out on her, trying to get her to take care of herself because I want her to stay here.
Yeah. What do they have her doing? Metformin?
She just started metformin, and I told her, because you have one hand, you need to push for a CGM. I don't care if it's freestyle. I don't care. Yeah. You need something. And my mom has lost some of her attitude, I think, in her old age. Mm-hmm. She's nicer when it comes to the doctors, and the doctor's like, "Well, your sugar's just kind of bouncing around, and I don't think a CGM would be good for your mental health right now," or however she worded it.
God, again, the wrong answer to a reasonable question. Hey, does your mom have any weight issues?
Yes.
Yeah, tell her to ask for a GLP. That might really help.
And that's what I told her too. I'm like, I hear good things about metformin and not so good things about metformin, and with the GLPs as well with stomach issues. And I told her, I was like, start the medicine, try it out. I was like, but for the love, if you start having issues, you call the doctor and tell him you want something else.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a GLP could easily lower her A1C and help her with her weight.
Right. And we have a history of type 2 diabetes in our family. One of my step uncle, he's not blood, but my step uncle and my mom's brother, blood uncle, about the age of 33, 34, they both had massive heart attacks and ended up type 2. So, and it was back to back on both of them.
Jeez. First of all, the lady's got one hand. A CGM is an obvious answer.
Right? That's what I asked her. I'm like, what do they want you to do? Prick your toes? I'm like, okay, do you like having your feet? Because maybe they should just give you a CGM.
I mean, it would be fine to check your blood sugar in her feet, but like, think about she still has to take her shoes off and she still has one arm. Like, it just, there's a lot. Why are you adding a level of difficulty to something when she could once every however many days, she could get the Eversense CGM and it's implantable for 6 months. I don't know if that's eligible for type 2s or not. Probably nothing's eligible for type 2s. So probably
right. And that's,
at least you put on a Dexcom for 10 days. You can easily put a Dexcom on with one hand.
Right.
Yeah. That doesn't make any sense.
I've been preaching it for a year and a half. I'm going to get my way. I'm going to get my way with this. So she's going to be wearing a CGM whether she likes it or not.
I hear stories like this and I sit here and there's part of me that thinks I can't possibly be that much smarter than everybody else. How does this happen? Like, how does someone say you don't need the stress of that? Like, you fucking idiot. What a dumb thing. Whoever said that to her, you're a moron. Like, my God, you're a moron. And I don't know. I just sit here and I think, I know I'm not that smart of a person. How is this possible that other people can't keep up with these simple ideas?
She has heart issues. I don't remember what it's called, but when I was pregnant with Lorelai, she had to go in and have the sac of her heart, like the electrical component. There was too much misfiring going on. Mm-hmm. And so they had to burn part of it.
An ablation?
Yeah, like an ablation type thing. And it was a big deal, but not a super big deal. They were able to fix it.
Right.
But in her time of going to the cardiologist and seeing the doctor and them doing blood work, historically, her A1C has been at a 6.2 for.
Oh, and nobody said anything the whole time.
Nobody said anything. And then she goes to this PCP and they're like, oh, your A1C is a 6.4. And when she told me her A1C was a 6.4, I laid into her, not about her diet and her eating habits, but about, okay, we need to start medication. We need to get you on a CGM. We need to start monitoring this so it doesn't get worse, because you can live the rest of your life on the medication and understanding maybe some diet changes, but just knowing the trend of your blood sugar when you eat certain things. This is doable. This is so doable. And she went to the primary care and they're like, well, you're pre-diabetic. You're not diabetic. So it took her A1C getting to a 6.9 before they'd be like, okay, well, here's some metformin.
Oh, that's a common story for type 2s. They sit the number of people I've been talking to who are 0.1 away from getting a GLP and their doctors are telling them, well, you got to get type 2 diabetes, then we'll give it to you. And they're like, I'm this 0.4 and this 0.5 would have made me a type 2. And they go, no, sorry. So that's an insurance thing.
Yeah, most definitely.
But that's still it's a system. It's set up. It says, look, we could stop you from getting sick, but we're going to wait till you're sick. And then we're going to see if we can't get it backwards for you. It's just fascinating. It really is. Everything is fascinating. Is there anything we haven't talked about that we should have?
No, you didn't ask me if there was any history in my family.
Oh, hold on a second. Is there any history of type 1 diabetes in your extended family?
Yeah, that and other autoimmune diseases. No,
Please do tell me about that, Andy.
My cousin was diagnosed in 1999. I was 9. He was 17. And shortly after, he was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And then PSA to anybody playing with Ancestry DNA tests. If you don't want to clean skeletons out of your closets, don't take them, because I found out who my dad was at 29 years old, and he had lupus and sarcoid of the lung.
Sarcoidosis?
Yep.
Oh, another sarcoidosis. Wait, what were you doing on Ancestry.com? Were you just trying to find out if you were Persian or something, or what were you doing? I
was trying to see what kind of European mutt I was. I took it just out of fascination, and then I did both. I did the Ancestry and the 23andMe. And I found first cousins I was told growing up, and I grew up with Dad A being my biological father, and he was not the best. We'll leave it at that. And then I overheard a conversation at 12 about Dad B. So I always knew that there was a possibility, but nobody would ever give me that validation. And so I took the tests. I found some first cousins. I reached out to them. They were able to tell me how we were related. It did lead me to Dad B. I was able to reach out to my brother and sister that I didn't know I had.
Jeez, why is everyone's life so confusing? Listen, can I give some advice here? Complete a sentence. Don't just say, oh, well, what if they don't eat? Then you've pre-bolus. Like, actually think it through and tell people the truth. That really should fix most of everyone's problems. Like, I mean, how is it possible that so many people have your story? Because your story is not uncommon. That story is not uncommon at all. I've heard about it and somebody talked about it, but nobody would really tell me. And I had a feeling, but no one would say. And holy hell, everybody's making this all a lot more difficult than it needs to be.
No, my mom did jump in and help. We found my grandfather, and I did a LabCorp grandparent test kit with him, and it came back positive. And then I did ancestry DNA. It took my sister and my grandmother about 1.5 years after we reached out to them to actually reach back out to me. They were grieving the loss of their son and their dad. And, there was a lot of speculation. Is Andy telling the truth? Does she just want money? And I'm like, y'all ain't got no money. I just want to know where I came from.
I want 23 of those $45 I know you've got in your pocket.
Right. But I talked to my sister. So, side note, I have a sister named Katie, and then my brother's name is Johnny, and then my mom's other daughter is named Caitlin, and she goes by Katie.
Perfect.
So I have 2 sisters named Katie, and they're both blood, they're both related. One's my dad's kid, one's my mom's kid.
Everyone on my wife's side of the family is named Mike.
Oh, dear God.
Yeah. My niece just started dating a guy, and it seems like it's probably going okay for the moment. So I bothered to ask what his name was. I said, hey, what's this guy's name you're dating? And she just started laughing. I was like, oh, my God, is it Mike? It's like, you guys got to travel outside of like the sphere you live in and look for other people. I don't want to kid you. My father-in-law, his name is Mike. His son's name is Mike. They had a baby and named him Mike. He's got a daughter who married a guy named Mike, and then they had a baby and named it Mike.
Oh, my God. Our neighbor's name is Mike on the right. Our neighbor's name is Mike on the left. And then my best friend who moved to Minnesota, her husband's name is Mike.
I don't understand. It's not a bad name, but what are we doing? There's others.
Hey, I didn't appreciate it when I was little because my name is Adrian Estelle and I was nicknamed Andy. So I didn't even know my name was Adrian until I started school. Growing up, I was always called Andy Rooney by my family, or hey, Andy, where's Opie? And then, starting school and then high school, I started getting the hey, yo, Adrian from Rocky. But I appreciate it now because at least it's not, Brittany or Ashley or something like that.
Oh, my God. Andy,
no offense.
Your life is a CW TV show. That's why you love Gilmore Girls so much.
Hey, most days are pretty mundane. I mean, I'm just hanging out with a 3-year-old and trying to keep the 5-year-old alive in kindergarten.
Well, it sounds like you're doing a very good job of that. Seriously.
Well, it's not without the group that you've put together and all the people that have come together. I didn't want to say it. I did it, but I mean, you're facilitating it. No.
Yeah,
No, there's thanks to be had for you for putting this all together. And then for all the people that have come on the podcast or just interact on the Facebook page. I mean, even if it's just one person that you help, you don't realize that the catalyst, that like the trickle down effect that happens from one person to the next, if you really put in the work to get to this point. It's amazing.
Well, you know what? I do deserve the credit because it really is me that started it. But like, I don't I don't deserve the ongoing credit in the same way as I do for starting it, if that makes sense. Oh yeah, no, where credit's due. It's just like I was talking about before, all the literature that's out there. You, Dr. Bernstein, think like a pancreas, sugar surfing, all of those ideas, while maybe there's differences in them, it's created a voice for the type 1 community that without, we would just be left with what the doctors have to say. And that's nothing against a doctor. I've had doctors tell me that they felt like the Juicebox was doctor bashing. And I'm like, but you're looking at it from your side of the street. Yeah. You need to come over here. You need to come over here, put my shoes on, and then listen to it. And maybe you'll
your mind might be changed a little bit.
Yeah. No, I agree. Listen, I also give a lot of credit to all the doctors who hear it and don't get their panties in a twist and then say, hey, it is possible that I'm doing some of the things that they just said. So, how can I make this better for other people? I have an episode called Listen to the Doctor with an endo who had the courage to come on here and say, I heard your podcast and I thought this is doctor bashing. And then I kept listening. And then she said, I thought I am doing some of this stuff. And now because of the podcast, I give better care to people. And, I'd love you to listen to the episode, but one of the things she said into it was, I spread this out through the staff and a lot of the staff came back and said, I don't want to listen to this. He's saying we're doing the wrong thing. Like, it doesn't feel good for me to hear this. But I would say to you, if it doesn't feel good to you to hear it, then maybe you should be examining why it is you feel that way, not what I'm saying. So, all I'm saying is teach people how to take care of themselves and don't let them sit around, contented with a 7A1C and 8A1C. Try to actually help them. And if you're not willing to help them, then send them somewhere else and see if they can get the help somewhere else. But don't just capture them in your little bubble and, doctor them into a grave,
Yeah, for sure. That's the goal. We're going to get my mom a CGM, whether she likes it or not. And that doctor, whether that doctor likes it or not.
Oh, she'll find it illuminating. My brother has type 2 and he said, what you've heard so many other people say about wearing a CGM, but man, it teaches you what you want to eat and what you don't want to eat. Almost like, God, that's not even worth it. Like if my blood sugar is going to go up like that, I don't want to eat that. He had a lot of moments like that wearing one, and it's been really valuable for him. And a GLP, by the way, his A1C went down 2 full points on a GLP.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Type 2. He's in the 5s now. It's going to fundamentally change his life.
Yeah. And I've been listening to the episode, like you had an episode about the teenager that's on the GLP and a chef's kiss. I mean, if it goes the right way, I can definitely see this being something that a GLP being used in management for teenagers, because that's one thing that I heard being in the hospital with, like, Lorelai would get sick and we couldn't control it at home. So she'd go to the ER, get admitted to the endo floor. We had a round with a doctor and then the nurses coming in, and they're so desensitized to everything. And the one thing that kept coming out of their mouths were, we're just used to bad diabetics. We're used to teenagers that don't take care of themselves. And I'm like, let me stop you there. Is it that they're not taking care of themselves or they don't know how?
Yeah. Because they're putting some effort in somewhere and it's obviously not in the right direction. I fundamentally reject the idea that people don't care about their health. I think that there's levels of effort you'll get out of people, but it also comes with levels of understanding and levels of direction. You can't just wake up every day and run into the same wall and expect that they're going to keep doing that. Eventually they're going to sit down and say, I'm going to stop running into this wall now. And if you don't show them where the door is, then that's what giving up looks like. It's not because they didn't give up because they wanted to give up. They gave up because the effort they put out every day didn't return anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And I could definitely see the GLP-1s being used for teenagers, especially in that heightened growth period where they're just so resistant to insulin.
I'm telling you, I can see it being used for a great many people with diabetes, type 1 or type 2. So I have more people coming on. I actually have a doctor coming on to talk about, like, kind of really lay out what GLPs are. I have more episodes with people who have been using them and talking about the experiences they're having with them. So, I'm going to keep talking about it.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, Andy, you were terrific. I really appreciate this. Thank you so very much. I don't know what to say. This is a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. I did too. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Hold on one second. I want to thank the Eversense CGM for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Learn more about its implantable sensor, smart transmitter, and terrific mobile application at eversensecgm.com/juicebox. Get the only implantable sensor for long-term wear. Get Eversense. US Med sponsored this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Check them out at usmed.com/juicebox or by calling 888-721-1514. Get your free benefits check and get started today with US Med. A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. If you or a loved one was just diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and you're looking for some fresh perspective, the Bold Beginnings series from the Juicebox Podcast is a terrific place to start. That series is with myself and Jenny Smith. Jenny is a CDCES, a registered dietitian, and a type 1 for over 35 years. And in the Bold Beginnings series, Jenny and I are going to answer the questions that most people have after a type 1 diabetes diagnosis. The series begins at episode 698 in your podcast player, or you can go to juiceboxpodcast.com and click on Bold Beginnings in the menu. Hey kids, listen up. You've made it to the end of the podcast. You must have enjoyed it. You know what else you might enjoy? The private Facebook group for the Juicebox Podcast. I know you're thinking, Facebook, Scott, please. But no. Beautiful group, wonderful people, a fantastic community. Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes on Facebook. Of course, if you have Type 2 or you're touched by diabetes in any way, you're absolutely welcome. It's a private group, so you'll have to answer a couple of questions before you come in. We'll make sure you're not a bot or an evildoer, then you're on your way. You'll be part of the family. I can't thank you enough for listening. Please make sure you're subscribed or following in your audio app. I'll be back tomorrow with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Hey, what's up, everybody? If you've noticed that the podcast sounds better and you're thinking, like, how does that happen? What you're hearing is Rob at Wrong Way Recording doing his magic to these files. So if you want him to do his magic to you, wrongwayrecording.com. You got a podcast? You want somebody to edit it? You want Rob.